Did you know this podcast is powered by Acast? Acast is the home of podcasting. For creators looking for freedom to grow their listeners and make money too. And creative brands looking for smart ways to advertise. Podcasters and advertisers in the know Acast. It's time you did too. Visit acast.com to find out more. Acast, for the stories.
We're one poem into lyrical ballads, and by God is it a wild one. We're reading through and contemplating Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, one of the weirder Gothic poems in the English language and one hell of a way to start a poetic project. Why would a mariner shoot an albatross with a crossbow? Why would a mariner even have a crossbow? We try to get to the bottom of these mysteries as we begin dipping our toes into this watershed volume of romantic poetry. The Cannonball is part of the Agora Podcast Network. Check out some of the other shows in the network like Ben Jacobs' From Wittenberg to Westphalia, a full exploration of the Protestant Reformation. Ben examines all of the nitty-gritty details of the history, theology, politics, and even the civic planning that went into the transformation of Europe from Catholic dominance to, well, whatever it was that came after. If you're online, check us out at thecannonballpodcast.wordpress.com. Find us on Facebook at The Cannonball Podcast, and on Twitter at CannonballPod. And if you or a kid in your life need English tutoring, SAT tutoring, or college essay help, drop me a line at claudmoinc@gmail.com. That's CLAUDEMOINC@gmail.com. I could really use the money. Thanks a lot. Oh, and be sure to rate and review on iTunes or wherever you get this podcast. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Cannonball, a podcast attempt to read all of the works in Harold Bloom's list of the Western Canon. This is Claude Myron Goozer, and with me as always is Daniel Doherty. Daniel, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. I'm undergoing the psychic turmoil of potty training a toddler. Which you've been through.
Oh, Lord.
You're about to be going through it again. You got your second one.
Yeah, in the process, the 2.5-year-old wants to be like the older kids, so he goes up to the potty and says, "I need to go pee," and then pushes it up and stands and sort of like leans over, like, you know how you see like drunk dudes at the bar sort of like with their hand hanging on the thing as they're sort of like maybe contemplating throwing up in the next 30 seconds. That's how he sort of looks as he's leaning on the potty, and he's making his best effort, but Daniel, he's not pulling his pants down. So that's been my potty training, but what's yours been?
Well, it's not to get too much into it. I don't want to, inflict this on all of our listeners, but just as a kind of window into my own, madness, right now, it's, I think you're right on the money there though. Like the one thing I didn't anticipate, and this is my first, and we're going through the potty training experience. One thing I didn't anticipate is just how many, dots there are to connect in the process. And I realized that, like, no one's born knowing how or why they ought to go in the toilet, in the commode, in the fixture. And something, like, I realized I've had to kind of rebuild my own rationale for it from first principles, and engaging in this project in order to, convince myself that this is worth going through. But no. She's terrific, and she's picking it up. We just decided to go with a kind of like full bore approach that, neither my wife nor I were fully aware of the ramifications. But you know what? That's the same thing as like having a child to begin with. So,
yeah. It's Oh, God. Well, speaking of horrors and terrors in the soul, let's turn to Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And in case you're sort of picking up in the middle of what we've been up to, Daniel and I decided to take on the first edition of Lyrical Ballads in pieces. We're going to start by taking a sort of brief look at Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and it might be a little bit of a shorter episode. And then we're going to do something that'll probably be a little bit of a shorter episode in the coming weeks on several of the poems sort of following Rime of the Ancient Mariner. We're going to do another one on some of the poems following those poems and sort of take a look at the narrative poems and things like that. And then we'll conclude with this, an episode on Tintern Abbey. And I think Tintern Abbey sort of deserves its own close read, as Ancient Mariner deserves its own close read, because these are, how do I put this? They're the bookends to the first edition of Lyrical Ballads. And they're there for a reason, though that reason might be somewhat inscrutable at the moment, because the ordering gets scrambled in the second edition. And, you know, starting off with Rime of the Ancient Mariner, it really is a challenge. Like, this really is a challenging poem. It's a challenging poem now. It's a dense symbolic artifact. And I can't imagine what it would have looked like to someone sort of cracking this open, you know, in the 1790s for the first time. What the hell is this thing? But the more I was getting into it this time around, the more that I saw how it does have certain kinds of correspondences with Tintern Abbey. Weird as that sounds. Yeah. And that's why I think maybe we can come back to Tintern Abbey on its own sort of in a couple weeks time. Cool. So, Daniel, was this your first time with the Ancient Mariner?
It was, well, it wasn't. This was among the poetry that was in the Norton anthology that I read for, you know, I think it must have been 11th grade, English literature. I have been, you know, it's kind of, well, it's one of those poems that has a fairly rich afterlife in popular culture, in that, you know, you have expressions like albatross around your neck, is very common. And in fact, Claude, you reminded me in the chat of that Monty Python bit with Live at the Hollywood Bowl, where it's John Cleese going around the neighborhood or around the audience with like a Peanuts guy at the ball game, but with an albatross, you know, around his neck.
Yeah, they have an interlude in the middle of the live performance, and John Cleese comes out in the back of the house wearing a dress and selling seagull sickles and an albatross. Right. So it's this really bizarre riff on the Ancient Mariner, and it's worth checking out just for the absurdity.
Yeah, but
anyway, please go ahead.
Yeah, but I did not know until we embarked on our Lyrical Ballads project that the version I was reading was an edited version from decades after its first appearance. So this was my first time with the 1798 version, which I discovered I really and I don't know if I'm, you know, I in a lot of ways I'm a much more mature reader. I'm much more open to poetry, but at the same time, like it really kind of struck me a lot harder because it's a lot weirder. A lot more, and I guess we'll get into talking about it, but a lot more deliberately archaizing in its spellings and the language that it chooses to use. But I will say that I didn't retain anything from my first reading beyond the most superficial recollection of like, you know, a guy shoots a bird, everyone gets mad at him, you know, I forget how it ends. Right. So this was a very strange thing to step into. It was very affecting. Yeah.
It was weird for me because I think I've mentioned this before. Like, for some reason, my dad had bits of Chaucer still memorized, and my dad, you know, he went to college and he was an educated dude, but he wasn't exactly, you know, steeped in the literary, except he kind of was, because I think the humanities were sort of pumped into them a little bit more forcefully back in the 60s. But he also had bits and pieces of the Ancient Mariner. And I remember the first time the first time I encountered this was him telling me about it on one of the weird walks we had with my dog. It was just, he said, I don't know. I just remember this weird thing about him shooting a bird. And then he told me the whole story of the Ancient Mariner. So I don't know. It was just this strange sort of connection with my dad. But, yeah, this is one that I sort of explored both versions of, back in undergrad. And as a bestial 19-year-old, it really was in one eye and out the other. And then later on in grad school and then afterwards, exploring this, and sort of knowing more about Coleridge, how he wound up, what his interests were and are, or, well, he's dead now. It sort of makes some sense and I can fit it into some things, but it is a goddamn weird poem. Yeah. And I keep saying that, but I really want to reemphasize just how strange this is. I mean, when something becomes so much a part of popular culture or so much a part of culture, it's easy to forget just how, well, in Bloom's own words, uncanny the original work is. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we sort of talked about this with Don Quixote, but yeah, please, I don't mean to step on you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that uncanny is like, that's such a vague term to use, but I think this is absolutely one of the best applications of it I can think of.
It makes so much sense and it makes no sense at all. But anyway, so, I'm surprised you didn't mention this one, the Simpsons, where they're out in the life raft, stranded at sea, and Homer has the line, water everywhere. Why not have a drink?
Yes.
It's somewhat ubiquitous, but the actual poem is really far out. So, all right, before we go much further with this, you, in our discussion ahead of time, you volunteered to give us a summary.
Yes.
And, I will fill in as I can, but again, this is a strange one. So let's take it away.
I'm going to give it a shot. And Claude, I just want you to know, I take no offense if you feel the need to, jump in and right the ship, as it were, to use some nautical terminology there. So the Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
I think we may be careening to some more nautical terminology.
Well, anyway, let's set sail. So anyway, okay. So the Rime of the Ancient Mariner kicks off with a kind of framing device where we are following a trio of young men who are on their way they're part of a wedding party. And they're on their way to join the festivities when they are detained by an ancient, kind of shrunken up man who proceeds to kind of glare at them until they agree to sit and listen. Basically, because he has like
just one of them.
Just one. That's right. Yeah. The others kind of continue on to the wedding party. That's right. And it's one of them who stays behind.
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
He's sort of, it's a little bit of the evil eye, right? It mentions like his stare or his something about his eyes, compels him to sit and listen. And the mariner starts telling him about this, voyage he went on, which began here in this own native harbor, which I'm taking to be, Plymouth or some other kind of, Devon, seaport there in the West Country. So, I won't be doing my Devonshire accent, but if you've ever heard pirate speak, that's the Devonshire accent. But the mariner proceeds to tell this tale about how he was on board a merchant vessel, presumably it's not a military ship, that was on its way south. It was going to cross the equator. It's heading south, presumably to round either the Cape Horn or Cape of Good Hope, but it's heading into the South Atlantic. Things are going well. Nice weather. They're making good time until they get kind of stuck in this weird morass, almost maze of icebergs and fog that kind of brings them to a standstill until an albatross is spotted kind of circling over. There's this albatross, the very large seabird. It's like a giant seagull. This albatross is spotted kind of flying above them. It stays with the ship and the weather improves. Like they actually are able to kind of make their way through this maze. And it's a great blessing. Everyone's very happy about it. And the mariner, for reasons I don't think are ever really, addressed in the poem, decides he's going to load up his crossbow, a strangely archaic weapon for, a ship presumably in the 18th century, and just shoot this bird out of the sky. So the albatross falls dead on the deck, and the ship is almost immediately becalmed. The winds that were driving them, give up. But initially everyone's happy about it though, because they thought the albatross brought the fog and ice with it. It was the bringer of the ice and fog. The mariner shoots it down. It's treated very just matter of factly. It's like 2 lines in the poem. He's like, yeah, I brought out my crossbow and shot it down. But it turns out, of course, the albatross was leading them out of this maze, this icebound prison. So once everyone realizes that, all the other sailors are then furious at this mariner. They are right. The winds die down. They're becalmed. The ocean starts transforming uncannily into this kind of rolling, slimy sea that's no one's going anywhere. There's rotting, slimy creatures crawling around. It becomes a nightmarescape. There's weird glowing lights. Some of the sailors dream that there's some spirit in the deep, deep ocean that has been, dragging them or is somehow affecting all this. But the long and short of it is they're stuck, right? They're absolutely trapped. So of course you're running out of supplies. You're running out of fresh water. There's no rain falling. They can't capture any rain. They can't make it to a port. And they're so parched that they can't even speak. But the mariner, at one point, he's lying, they're all lying almost dead on the deck. The mariner spots a speck on the horizon. He sees it as a ship. It's moving toward them. He's so dry mouthed that he has to bite into his cheek to get blood into his mouth to wet his tongue enough.
His arm.
Oh, his arm. I'm sorry. Yeah, he bit his. He bites into his arm. Okay, yeah. And sucks the blood out. You're right. He sucks his own blood vampirically to get enough blood to moisten his lips to cry out, "There's a sail!" And everyone thinks that they're going to be saved. But of course, this being the Ancient Mariner, it's this weird ghost ship with these allegorical spirit figures visible on it. I think it was 2 figures.
They're playing dice. Yeah. It's death playing dice.
Yeah. And and in some capacity, I'm sorry, I can't remember the details, Claude, but in some capacity, these 2 figures cause all kinds of like cosmic and astrological miracles or omens to happen. There's like the sun sinks, stars emerge, all kinds of mysterious sky stuff happening, and the sailors all drop dead except for the mariner.
Exactly.
The souls of these dead men like leap out, and are he's terrified. All this time, of course, this is all being related to this poor young man who just wanted to go, get drunk and joke around with his buddies about their friend getting married. But the mariner reassures this young man that no, I'm not a ghost. I'm alive. I lived. But he's there alone on the ship, surrounded by all these corpses. There was really one of my favorite lines in the poem, and one of them that I think was vastly better in the 1798 poem. But it says here, the many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and a million slimy things lived on, and so did I. Just a beautiful piece of poetry right there. I loved it.
Oh yeah, it's that and so did I.
And so did I. Yes, I am a slimy, rotten creature just like these. He attempts to he tries to pray for death, but is unable to. He's just laying there, just trying to die. Try as he might, but at some point, the moon rises. We have some more, astronomical effects. It casts some bizarre shadows, and he starts seeing sea monsters kind of moving in these shadows and the casting weird light. And he's struck by their beauty. You know, he's struck by just I don't know quite, but and he blesses them. And it's in that moment that he's then able to pray. He's able to pray. And I forgot to mention, he had the albatross around his neck. The other sailors had chained the corpse of the albatross around his neck as a kind of, scarlet A, really, for albatross. And that falls off of his neck. It falls into the sea and plummets down into the depths. And the mariner lives to tell his tale to this terrified young man.
I think so. It starts to rain. He gets some water from that. Yeah. The dead bodies stand up and I think the Disney film Pirates of the Caribbean really sort of captured this when they had the ghost pirates. Yeah. But they stand up and run the rigging and sail him on home. He has the briefest of encounters with these spiritual voices that come to him that narrate everything that he did. And then he gets just in sight of shore and the ship wrecks. Yes. And he's saved at the last minute by the hermit and basically this guy who works the harbor to go salvage people from the wrecks. Yeah. There's this hermit from the wood who blesses him, who's this kind of, I guess, holy figure. And then he's rowed back to shore, and now he's compelled. He has this supernatural compulsion, or possibly a psychological compulsion, or perhaps both, to stop people he sees who he feels in some way, shape, or form are receptive to his message. He holds them with his vampiric eye, and he has to relate this tale.
That's right. It is vampiric eye. They actually, that's right. Use the term vampiric. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, he stops and, has to hold them with his vampiric eye. He has to relate the tale, and he leaves whoever it is to whom he has related the tale, sadder and wiser. The end.
What a way to introduce yourself to the world of letters, right?
Exactly. I mean, and then nothing else. Like, all right, that's the thing. It's such a bizarre symbolist performance. I mean, we were talking about this when we were doing Faust, that, you know, a lot of my frustration was with the fact that I had to read it in translation. My German is terrible. And so you're sort of trying to parse the language and parse the symbolism at the same time, because it is so densely symbolic. And Coleridge does all of that in English, a language I can read, kind of. And it's no less requiring of unpacking. It's such a torturous text. And it's so brief. I mean, it really isn't that long, and it goes by so swiftly, partly due to the ballad form. I mean, this is a ballad, and he really utilizes the ballad to get you right in. Yeah. Like, boom, right from the start.
It really
and
is.
He can use it for that narrative thrust.
Yeah. The rhythm of it is, it drives, and it's in very kind of compact, units, right? Like, I mean, each stanza is like 4 lines with this very driving rhythm, and you just go from one to the other. And it's very easy I found myself when I was reading it, like, it's very easy to just kind of like get caught up in that and just read, and then think to yourself like, well, wait a minute, what the hell did I just read? Like, I have to go back and actually parse what the semantic content was.
Yeah, I mean, it's really wild. And I think the stanza form, I mean, again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but I think that particular poetic form really does do a lot of the work of making it, of giving it this kind of mystique, because you're sort of pushed forward further and further and faster and faster. you don't have time to sort of pause and suss out, wait a minute, who's doing what with the what now?
Yeah.
And so you're just, okay. So the zombie sailors just get up and run the ropes and then, there's some water and he drinks it and it's all, whatever. I don't know. And it just kind of pushes you into that. But this is unlike anything else that comes immediately after it. This is unlike anything else in lyrical ballads.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Coleridge really fully embracing the goth. I mean, we're just throwing it down.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that there aren't kind of gothic sort of elements here and there creeping around the edges, either in lyrical ballads or in the stuff that kind of led up to lyrical ballads. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing around there, at least in lyrical ballads, that's this overtly supernaturally weird, right? So my first question, and this was sort of my first note, is what the hell is this? All right, that's kind of a stupid question, but I was at this crux, and I sort of talked to a friend of mine about this. Is this a pastiche? Mm-hmm. Or is this really working in a kind of folk tradition?
Because I was wondering with this, is there some kind of like, is there a corpus of like grizzled old like sea shanty epic that this is drawing from, or is it sui generis?
All right. So the ballad, I guess, traditionally had been used as a kind of folk narrative tool. Mm-hmm. If you sort of go to its, I guess, 17th and earlier 18th century use, it's got this folk element to it. And I think we talked about that a little bit last time, that just by making a ballad, you're making this kind of political and social statement. But it's also used for narrative. So the Ballad of Sir Patrick Spens, right? That, if I remember correctly, is one about a drowned sailor. So maybe there is this seafaring element to the ballad. Yeah. I'm not quite sure. I'm being jokey and goofy. I'm pretty sure there's not a seafaring, necessarily a seafaring tradition. But the question is, like, is he drawing on an actual sort of folk, not exactly a mythos, but folk beliefs or how do I put this? A folk framework in order to tell the story of what I'm reading as a kind of romantic redemption arc.
Yeah.
But it could also, like, in that case, the archaic words may not be necessarily archaic, but reflective of the spoken language at the time, right? Yeah. So is this him trying to capture an accent? Sort of like how Burns wrote in Scots, right, which isn't an accent, right?
Right, it's a dialect with a common ancestor to English as we know it.
Yeah. So Burns wrote ballads in Scots as a kind of representation of, I guess, local authenticity. Is this Coleridge trying to capture some kind of local authenticity, or is this him inventing / developing something that sounds like an archaic authenticity, mm-hmm. or archaic local authenticity, in the manner that someone like Spenser did?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Spenser and the Fairy Queen kind of,
right.
Yeah. He sort of invented this mock Middle English,
or like
or sort of invented all these words,
or like how Cervantes did with Don Quixote.
Exactly.
Like how Don Quixote was basically speaking in this pastiche of the romantic, or the romances that he was so obsessed with.
Did you know this podcast is powered by Acast? Acast is the home of podcasting. For creators looking for freedom to grow their listeners and make money too. And creative brands looking for smart ways to advertise. Podcasters and advertisers in the know Acast. It's time you did too. Visit acast.com to find out more. Acast, for the stories.
So I actually asked a friend of mine who is an expert in this, and she said, flip a coin. No, I'm being like really silly. No, what she said is that there are arguments both ways, but the context for the placement would suggest that what he's aiming for in this instance is something like trying to capture a folk tradition. Right.
Yeah.
Because everything else in the lyrical ballads is trying to do that. Right. It's sort of like, this is rural life. This is rustic life. These are folk traditions. This is what, non-Londoners believe, or quote unquote sophisticated people believe. So it seems most likely that it's not exactly that kind of Spencerian creation of, neologistic archaism.
Yeah.
It's him trying to approximate certain kinds of folk beliefs and then infuse them with his own sort of symbolic constructs. But it's weird. Having said that, it really is tough to read because you are sort of stopped here and there by these weird words that, if you've got a glossary or a well-edited edition of the lyrical ballads, you can say, oh, okay, I see what this means. I see what he's doing. I see how this fits together. But I wonder what this would have been like, as a first read. Again, this is a hell of a shot across the bow.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So that's just the language and the form itself. So what the hell does this thing mean?
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing that I think we can address is something that you pointed out. They don't, or Coleridge doesn't say why he shot the albatross. I mean,
yeah.
We can presume that the shooting of the albatross is the sort of, I guess, sin of the piece, the thing that sort of sets the mariner apart, alienates him from everyone else, and sets the whole thing off on disaster. So why did he do it? Daniel, any guesses?
Well, so considering the wholeness of the poem, and considering...
Wrong. There's no reason.
Damn it. Well, hold on, because my reason is that there is no reason. Also, because considering the wholeness of the poem and that it's, a very theologically steeped, a very, very obsessed with death and redemption, right? It's clearly a very Christian poem that I would think it is simply in the nature of man to fuck it up, right? It's original
exactly.
sin. It's it's like, what's the Calvinist conception of, like pervasive corruption? There's nothing anyone could do that won't be fucked up somehow because you're not actually connected to God yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Pynchon reinvents that as inherent vice.
Sure.
It's kind of like the running theme in that novel, but, it's really funny, but, that's exactly it. Like, this is him taking on original sin. I mean, we sort of talked about this a few Halloweens ago with Christabel.
Yeah.
Which was him doing much the same thing, trying to think through, all right, why is it that we do awful things, or why is evil in this world? This is him doing much the same. It's in Freudian terms, it's perversion. Why do we do things that are against our own interest? Why do we do destructive things for no reason? And that's exactly what this is a destructive act for no reason. You can't interpret the bird. And I think he makes a good point of showing that the other sailors can't interpret the bird. Was shooting it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? At first, everybody says, yay. Then everybody says, boo. There's no real way to fully comprehend what the bird means, right? It seems to, later on the spirits say, well, this was the bird that was a friend to the spirit of the ice, which sailed everything through. But in the moment, all they know is that it's following along and they're having fun throwing biscuits at it. Well, to it, excuse me. They're not trying to assault it. They're throwing
food to it. Yeah, like you feed the ducks.
Yeah. And that's fine. It seems benevolent or benign. And for no reason whatsoever, the mariner decides to destroy it. right? I mean, it's almost like a kid squashing an earthworm or something like that, or a kid squashing an ant.
Well, it's a bit like, I mean, speaking of Freud, it's a bit like, the Thanatos drive, like in Civilization and its Discontents, the tension between Eros and Thanatos, like, just sort of thoughtless destruction.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. There's no thought behind it. There's no motivation whatsoever. There's just destruction. Mm-hmm. So that's really the crux of this. And that's going back through this and thinking through this again. That's where I think the form really works with the subject matter, because you don't have time to stop and think, well, why do you do that? You're just boom, you're on.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of like this kind of central mystery that I think isn't really that much of a mystery if you stop and unpack it a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
And I think you did. Now, the further question is, why is he stopping the people that he stops? And there's this real conundrum here. All right. So what he produces, I keep thinking about this in terms of Paradise Lost. What happens is, the original sin, that destructive impulse, it symbolically alienates the ancient mariner.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, symbolically and literally everyone dies around him. But he's isolated and alone, and he's the one thing that cannot die. All right. Now, this is going to get into a whole weird area, but one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about Milton with Paradise Lost was this way that sin is that isolating thing. Thinking of yourself as this sort of like individual isolated being is what leads you into sinfulness, right? Self-awareness, self-consciousness, meaning having an individual consciousness, is the first step towards damnation in Paradise Lost. And that seems to be what's going on both here and in Tintern Abbey. Conversation for another day.
Yes.
One of the things that was troubling or always troubled me about Milton is like, well, motherfucker, what did you want? Right. We were talking about that kind of like Buddhist aspect of him, of, sort of oneness with the universe, and this embrace of, thoughtlessness, not in a pejorative sense, as in I'm doing a thoughtless act like murdering the albatross, but thoughtlessness in this kind of unawareness of the self, differentiated from the whole of the universe, so that the individual self is submerged into the universe itself. Yeah. Right. Okay. Is this making any sense at all?
Yeah. No, I'm on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the problems with that is, when can you really truly become a thoughtless being reintegrated into the environment itself? Well, when you're dead.
Right. Yeah. And that takes care of it. And you're very literally reintegrated into the environment. You're fine. Like that's, you did it.
So that's one of that's going to be this kind of like tension that I think is lurking underneath a lot of this stuff. And that's a weird kind of tension that's sort of lurking underneath Ancient Mariner, that has a lot to do with this weird sort of, I don't know, it seems to me an unresolvable paradox, right? What is the compulsion? Why is the compulsion? What is the aim of the compulsion?
Yeah.
All right. So, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just like, I'm with you. That was lead me on forward.
All right. So this is me trying to do the math in real time.
Right.
All right. He disrupts a wedding ceremony, which symbolically can be read as, or has symbolically been read as, sort of generations coming together, humans reunifying. Let's celebrate the coming together of this generation and the production of the next generation. It's a socializing festival, right? Yeah. For the creation of society, literally, right? So he stops someone heading into that festival, that socializing festival, to strike them with a tale that will lead them to a moment of self-awareness and self-consciousness that will leave them shocked and isolated from the socializing situation. In a literal sense, because he's stopping this dude from going and having a good time and getting drunk at the wedding.
Right.
But in this figurative sense, because he says, tomorrow you'll wake up, sadder and wiser.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So is the ancient mariner compelled to reintroduce the sin of isolation? Is he compelled to perform his alienating act by alienating others?
Yeah.
Is this a benevolent curse, or is this him cursing others with his new knowledge?
Well, okay, so here's one for you.
Okay.
No, this is in no way saying this was intentional on the part of the author. This is just me spitballing, whatever. Yeah. I think what we have here is the mariner is, I don't know if there's already a term for this in Buddhism, but it sounds like he's an anti-bodhisattva. Right?
Okay.
He is, of course, the bodhisattva is this concept in Buddhism where that's someone who has come close to attaining the enlightenment, the same enlightenment that Gautama Buddha did, but holds back from crossing that threshold so that they can remain an independent, ego identity that can aid others in that path, in getting closer to that path, right? They purposefully hold themselves back from full enlightenment to help others get there. Yeah. The mariner, the mariner is here keeping people from getting any nearer to nirvana and the dissolution of self in whatever's going on around them, right? He's there to inflict alienation on people. That is his spiritual task. So,
but is that for the sake of creating another bodhisattva? I mean, is this like a kind of shock doctrine sort of thing?
It does say that he's not, he's picky about it, right? It's not everyone. It's not that he's inflicting this on all and sundry. It's not like he's inflicting this on anyone he can, right? He's not inflicting it on anyone who happens to cross his path or is unlucky enough. It's people who he can see has something in them that requires this.
Will respond.
Yeah. So maybe so. Like maybe it is a matter of like, in order for the kind of broader spiritual health of everybody, someone has to be the sin eater almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird. I mean, it gets into this whole weird goth territory. No, I mean, it literally gets kind of S&M.
We're
like
very,
the sort of,
we're very haunted by the Gothic on this show. I've realized.
Yeah. Well, I'm haunted by the Gothic. I was kind of a goth kid before there was such a term, before it sort of reified into, the look.
Into the, your hot topic-ism.
Yeah. We didn't have a hot topic.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so it's that weird kind of thing, that sort of conundrum that I don't know. I still have a hard time parsing, because alienation seems to be sort of at the root of this whole project. Mm-hmm. I keep jumping ahead to Tintern Abbey, because Tintern Abbey, I think, lays out the project and lays out the whole romantic project in such a clear way. It's sort of like, well, once you know that, you go back and look at everything and like, oh, this all makes total sense. But what is the sort of overcoming of alienation in this poem? It would seem to be the moment where he blesses everything unawares.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
So there are two moments. First, he tries to pray. This is exactly where you were pointing out that wonderful line: "The many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and a million slimy things lived on, and so did I. Mm-hmm. I looked upon the rotting sea and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the eldritch deck, and there the dead men lay. I looked to heaven and tried to pray, but or ever a prayer had gushed, a wicked whisper came and made my heart as dry as dust." Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, I guess I've got too much Milton in me. Too much goth Milton. Anyway, but
the Goth Puritan, that's a good brand. You lean into that.
Jesus, man. Yeah. I spent 10 years in Boston, man. I don't know. But, the thing that I always see sort of going on there, or it's resonant with Milton's anti-Catholic, anti-ritual stance, right? The moment that he can't pray is the moment that he tries to pray. The moment that you try to form it to the ritual, or the moment that you try to be conscious about your connection to the divine, is the moment that you will fail.
Yeah.
Because it's not sort of the natural overflow. Right. Remember, or the spontaneousness that Adam and Eve had in the garden before they had fallen.
Right.
Well, actually, after they fall, they have that spontaneous moment where they, try to speak to the divine, and they really feel bad and really feel sorry, and just say in the plainest possible words what their emotions are.
Yeah.
There's a kind of self-awareness in the act of praying at that moment, that prevents him from being able to pray. Now, to my knowledge, Coleridge wasn't a Puritan. I don't know enough about his theological position. I believe at this point he was a Unitarian.
Yeah, and I would
leaning
think like
Unitarian.
Puritanism as a distinct kind of factional formation in English Protestantism had kind of spent its force by the end of the 18th century, and had become like what's called the Congregationalists in the United States today. I don't know enough about the religious history of the UK to know what would have happened with them there if they basically they would have been folded into Anglicanism by that, successfully folded into Anglicanism, and anyone who didn't like it had gone to the colonies,
Right. So I'm not exactly sure of his specific theological position. I am sure that he had one.
Sure.
He definitely has one later when he's, arguing for the clerisy, basically, an extra cabinet office of priests to guide the king into making sound theological judgments, and sound parliamentary judgments as well. He goes full on theocratic craziness. But anyway, it doesn't strike me though that his earlier position seems cognate necessarily with something that Milton was so into. And yet there are these points of contact with Paradise Lost, or I think I'm seeing points of contact with Paradise Lost that suggest a shared belief in unconscious prayer. Because what happens when he sort of finds redemption is he doesn't mean to, but he does praise. Beyond the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. So they're sort of like sparking in the moonlight. Yeah. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire, blue, glossy green, and velvet black. They coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. Oh, happy living things, no tongue their beauty might declare. A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. It's the unawareness, it's the unconsciousness that allows him to have this be an actual prayer that allows for redemption. And he blesses those things which are other to him.
Yes.
He blesses the alien. He finds beauty and awe and love and acceptance and cherishing for the thing that is not him.
Yes.
So it's that acceptance of the other and the otherness of the world around him, which leads to the redemption and the lack of alienation and the rehabilitation, right? To some degree.
Yeah.
But the rehabilitation takes the form of being compelled to go from town to town, person to person, locale to locale, spot that one dude and say, hey, listen, right?
You have the look of somebody who could use a tale of a terrifying ordeal to sink into your soul. Yeah.
You seem like a guy who needs his shit shook up. So like, that's sort of, that's this weird moment of things, but it's that sort of forgetfulness of alienation or that sort of acceptance of the other or not seeing the other as other anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's the reconciliation of the divine to the profane in Christ, right?
Exactly.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Wordsworth at this point in his career is going to get off the boat. Wordsworth goes in Tintern Abbey, he goes full on pantheist. Yeah. And this, I think, is Coleridge. This always strikes me as Coleridge sort of saying pantheist, but let's rein it in.
Sure.
Let's Christianize the pantheist.
Well, it's pantheist in a sense.
Yeah, we can have your holistic oneness, but Jesus.
Right. Yeah. It's the holistic, and indeed the holistic oneness is that argument for Jesus, right? It's like you can't extend yourself to extend blessings to these completely alien creatures that aren't even aware of you. And it is in such an act of recognition of universality, a kind of pantheistic impulse, that you discover the reason and purpose for the incarnation. So yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. This poem's easy. We figured it out.
But it still needs, there's something in Coleridge that is really, it's something I find. He's often threatened by his own, how do I put this? All right. He does something very, very similar in Kubla Khan.
His other most famous poem, really. Yeah. That's the other one. If you were reading assigned poetry in high school, the two you would have read from Samuel Coleridge are Rime of the Ancient Mariner or, Kubla Khan. Yeah.
Yeah. In Xanadu de Kubla Khan, a saintly pleasure dome decree. Where Alf the sacred river ran through caverns of measureless demand down to us on the sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round, so on and so forth. Anyway, sorry, I've taught that one a million times. But in Kubla Khan, it's all about this godlike figure who can, in Xanadu de Kubla Khan, a stately pleasure dome decree. Kubla Khan does what God does. He says it and it is,
right.
In the beginning was the word, God says it and it is, right? Kubla Khan can do that. And Coleridge at the end of the poem, or this Coleridge speaker at the end of the poem says, a damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing about Mount Abora. And he basically says, I had the muse once, and if I could, and I was interrupted, and if I could get it back, I would be the warrior god king that was Kubla Khan.
Yeah.
But my man, if you got it back and became the warrior god king that was Kubla Khan, you would be a heretic.
Yeah.
Because that you are attempting to take God's place. There's something threatening about Coleridge's own poetic ability in a certain way, and he has to pull it back. Right. And so in this is going somewhere in, Ancient Mariner, he still needs to be sanctified. The Ancient Mariner still needs to be sanctified by the old holy hermit. There's this weird way, like, why have the, okay, it's a great creepy, not creepy, but it's a great weird detail, rowing out to save him from the shipwreck and the only survivor of the shipwreck. And it creates this giant suction down. It's kind of like the end of Moby Dick, but, it's this great weird detail, but why do we need the hermit of the wood? We need the hermit of the wood to bless him, to sanctify him.
Yeah.
So it needs some kind of ratification, right? Even if it is this weird
it's ratification from an ascetic, right? It's ratification from another individual who has undergone unusual privations in that circumstance of their own volition. Yeah.
So there's something about Coleridge that at least strikes me as seeming to need external validation for the supernatural message or the theological message or whatever this is. Like Wordsworth at this stage of the game is just going to be like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
I heard the divine, and it's just the oneness of all things, man. Just drop whatever you got in your hands, and come join me behind the bus, and life is good. But Coleridge still needs some kind of structure there. But what a damn weird poem. I mean, we're still trying to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
Does that do some kind of justice to this, at least for tonight?
I think so. I think and I hope our listeners recognize that it's well worth your while to go and read it. I would recommend that 1798 version. There's a cool, I found it's on a website called Prospero's Isle, a nice little Shakespearean allusion there. But if you just do a Google search for lyrical ballads 1798 edition, it should show up. But it's on the Prospero's Isle website. They have this terrific side-by-side version of the original text versus the revised 1820 or whatever version. That is the one that would have been in your Norton anthology that you read in high school. And I would really recommend kind of looking at them side by side, paying attention to the 1798 one. That's the one that you're actually reading. But it's very interesting, and I would think if we had a little more time, which I'm perfectly happy with the time we have spent on it. But it would be an interesting exercise to kind of go through and see what the changes that were made, how those inflect this interpretation we've managed to cobble together, right? But in any case,
and I guess we can close by talking a little bit about that publication history.
Oh, sure.
He revised it for the second edition and toned down a lot of the archaisms.
Yeah.
And toned down some of the rugged meter. And then later on, he even added his own annotations to explain exactly what he means. So it's sort of even with the annotations and, I've got the annotations in another edition. I think it's in my Norton Coleridge, checking my bookshelf. Even with the annotations, it's still but wait a minute. Why?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
Yeah.
It's still a pretty rugged text. It's a pretty meaty, chewy one. And I really would urge everyone to just, if English is your first language, or if you've got enough English, go play with this because it's a fun one. It's a weird one.
And you're right that it's compelling. It's a really, I don't want to say earworm kind of thing, but the actual rhythm and language is really compelling, and you read it, and then there are these really satisfying sequences of sounds that you can make in English that are in there. But as we've kind of gone on and on about, it's also a weird puzzle box in a very strange way. Yeah.
So the next section of poems that we're going to move into are kind of the opposite of this. A huge chunk of lyrical ballads is either shorter sort of ballad poems about nature, or somewhat naturalistic dialogues or monologues of pretty simple country life. So get geared up for that section, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good, man.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hey y'all, this is Kenya, creative director and co-founder of Domino Sound.
And this is Alexandra De Palma, executive producer and co-founder of Domino Sound.
And we're a queer, disabled, Black woman-owned podcast production company and network, creating authentic, inclusive, provocative content.
We just launched Domino Presents, which is a new series of special audio projects. The premiere episode features the founders of Poppy Juice, the queer art collective throwing the hottest parties in New York City and around the world.
We also recommend The Cheat Code, our hit 10-episode audio soap opera surrounding a love affair. Think Love and Hip Hop meets The Affair meets The Sopranos.
Follow us on IG at Domino Sound CO to keep up.
And listen to our shows on the Acast app or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Domino Sound.
Acast recommends.